Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Meeting Incredible South Asian Creatives. We did this series last year and we've begun this again. Typically, we've called it Kitabi Qisse, which is bookish tales for those who can understand Hindi and Urdu. And we are very excited to welcome a very, very accomplished author. And her book we read last year, which was really exciting and a wonderful narrative. And this is the author of Mona Hassan's Secret Diary, and that is Salma Hussain, and she's right here from Canada. So before I go any further, I'm going to ask her to do a little intro for everyone who's watching this. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you so much, Hassan, for having me here. I think it's a great honor. I'm really excited because this is a South Asian inclusive space. We're celebrating South Asians and how wonderful for that. And we're celebrating gender and gender diversity within South Asia. I think that's wonderful. A little bit about me. I'm an author now. This is my first book, The Secret Diary of Mona Hassan. It's a middle grade novel, which means the character is a young girl. She's 11, turning 12. And this talks about her immigration journey. It's also about her menstruation journey, but we'll get into that in a bit as well. I actually have a background in law. So, like a good immigrant BT, I started off. I always had an interest in literature. I always wrote on the side, but it's not something I envisioned writing full time or writing books, getting into the publishing side of the world. It's not something I envisioned was a possibility for myself. I can see many brown authors. Like most of us South Asians growing up in the East, I grew up in the Middle East, and I used to go in summer in Pakistan every summer. I read the typical British classics that we all used to read. There was lots of Enid Blyton, there was Nancy Drew, there was the Hardy Boys. It was all kinds of literature, and I just didn't think there was. I resonated so deeply with the characters I read about, but I didn't see many of us, and the few of us that I did see, I think were mostly male. I'm trying to think of some famous male authors. You heard the names, but it's not a viable career that you saw for yourself. And so I did an English degree at university, and then I went off and I was like, what do I do with this now? And I was like, let me do this table thing and let me get into law. And I practiced law for a couple of years. On the side, what happened, Absana, is that I had children, and both my daughters were born here in Canada. One day one evening I was putting one of my daughters to bed, and she must have been under 5 at that time. And she turned to me and she said, "Mama, I know you weren't born here. Were you a regular kid just like us?" And I thought, oh my gosh, my own daughter is asking me this. I just found it so fascinating. And I wanted to reply to her in the voice of a child. I thought, let me start writing a book that explains what kind of kid was I in the Middle East. And Secret Diary of Mona opens with Mona's life in growing up in Dubai, as well as going for summers in Pakistan. And I wanted her to see what a quote unquote regular kid might be like. Um, and I just started writing. In the beginning, I was just writing. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was just writing a tale, and one thing led to another, and then it evolved and became something else.
I was really intrigued by what you said, and I think the more I meet people from South Asia, I see how common our reading habits are, and also the idea of like get a stable job, which is also something we've heard all along. And that's to me one of the reasons why representation in all fields matters, because we want kids to know that they can choose professions where they can show different parts of themselves, or whatever feels or speaks to them more clearly. Because when you can only be what you can see is something that at least I believe in. And as you're raising kids yourself, and as you were even diving into this book when you wrote it, did it occur to you that representation is important and I'm going to like pay attention to it? Like, why was it important? Why were you thinking that's the kind of line you wanted to take?
100%. I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking. I thought it's so important for representation and for stories that speak to a very authentic experience. And I really wanted to create a story that was outside what we've typically seen, even within the Desi community, even within, I come from a Muslim background, even within the Muslim background, certain stories don't get said. And I think such such a waste of potential here, because
Mm.
when we can see ourselves mirrored back, and when we can see the full depth and breadth of our community, it's stronger that way, because we accept all of us. And I just wanted a very inclusive space where I was like, well, I want to write a good book about a quote unquote bad girl. A girl who's mischievous, maybe, who's a bit rebellious. And these things in our community get hushed down, especially for girls, but across the genders, really. Like, we're told as a community, and this is a survival tactic, and I do understand it. We're told as an immigrant community to emulate the model minority myth, like, let's get the stable jobs, let's keep our heads down, let's build wealth for the next generation. And I agree in all those messages. I think that's wonderful. I think that's been necessary, actually, at times. But I think, how wonderful if we can do something different as well. So all of that was playing in the back of my mind.
You talked about the model minority, and it occurred to me that even when it comes to writing, often we have two or three writers from South Asia who've done incredible work, but somehow each time you see a list of the best South Asian or here's what to read, it's literally just the three people that get called out. And I wish more mainstream media, especially, would sort of see the diversity within our communities as well. And even if it's about an immigrant experience, it has so much nuance and it has so many different perspectives that come in. My big reason for the reason that why I loved this book was that, one, it felt so natural. It was very firmly placed in middle grade, like the 12-year-old experience felt true. It had this very unique voice. And secondly, like the Coke and Pepsi test, like when you blindfold someone and ask them, is this Coke or Pepsi, most people are not able to distinguish. And I think children's experiences have generalizations at that age as well. Like a 12-year-old is a 12-year-old. I felt like that 12-year-old because I'm like, oh my god, this is how I felt, even though my experience was so different than what you were describing. And is this the kind of feedback you're hearing? Like, what's the feedback you've heard from other readers?
Uh, that's so sweet of you to say. Yes, absolutely. And I've done some events with kids. The best feedback, I mean, I love all feedback, but some of the best feedback I love is when kids tell me, when kids are like, oh, that felt so real. And they're always amazed when I say, oh no, these things didn't happen to me. I was not that rebellious or adventurous in my mind, yes, but in real life, no. um, I love hearing that. I particularly love when young girls tell me, I love the stories about menstruation, going through my period and feeling that disconnect with your parents. These are universal stories. We're all going through that. We don't often share that. I've had two kids now tell me something about the Uncle Annoying character that I've written in my book. That's also, to me, very important. And that's heartwarming. I'm looking to, with this book anyways, I put in so many different themes. There's this blend of serious with humorous that I tried to achieve, because I wanted to talk about serious topics, but I also wanted to do it in, I'm calling it a non-traumatic way. Like,
Mm.
sometimes I feel that when we read books from our communities, there are, and I understand why there are so many heavy topics, and yet, it takes a toll on a person to read such heavy topics. And so I wanted to write about some of this more serious things that happen in our community, but I really wanted kids to laugh throughout reading it, because humor is something that's really gotten me through tough times. And I want kids to believe, and I really want kids, especially immigrant girls who are coming to a new life, or creating a new life, either in this country or in the States, or maybe even in a new city, around the world, whatever it is. I want them to know that humor has power, and the stories we tell, even to ourselves, have the power to uplift us and empower us. So that's what I try to do.
I love that because I feel like the stories that we tell ourselves are probably the most important stories. And especially at that age when our ideas are still forming. And you touched on a couple of themes. One is that, the I guess humor being somewhat of a thing that makes us resilient. We can go through times by just, being in them, being present, even like understanding the funny parts of hard things, which I think anyone who's gone through a really harsh childhood experience would relate to. A lot of communities in conflict will relate to what you just said as well. And the other thing you were talking about, earlier as well, was this whole immigrant thing of, for the right reasons. Some topics are hard when you're as an immigrant coming to a new country, you're still trying to settle in, and you want to have, I guess, the stability that you're seeking because
Yeah.
you probably have come for, finding a better life in many cases. And so, balancing all of this just feels difficult. Like, as a
Yeah.
parent myself, I can tell you there are days where I'm constantly judging, is this right? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And how do I actually raise a child who can
Yeah.
feel comfortable in who they are? And, for as a mom of a boy, how do I raise him to be a feminist? And how do I make him understand that gender roles and stereotypes are something he needs to question?
Yeah.
So, what are some of your tips, especially for immigrant parents who are here, who are far away from a heritage culture, where they're trying to balance what could you culturally give a child and then still make them even question some of it, which may or may not be, I guess, is that what they really want to believe in? Like, is that what the child really feels? Like, how do you balance those conversations yourself?
For myself, I do this, and I talk with my other mom friends about how to do this, or parent friends about how to do this. We truly believe like communicating with your child is so important. We all know this. Uh, in tandem to that, you have to be so non-judgmental with children, because everyone's going through a phase. This is true for kids. This is true for adults. This is true for any heroes you see in your life, any role models you have. Everyone is going through a phase, and to open and to stay in dialogue with somebody, being very non judgmental about their feelings, to understand that everybody is in a state of flux. It was interesting to me to write the story of Mona because, Mona goes on an immigration journey, but at the same time, she's also just a kid trying to figure her life out. There's a line in the book where I say that, where Mona asks, at what age do adults stop figuring it out? And the truth really is, not, we don't, do we? Like,
Hmm.
we're constantly changing and evolving, and as long as we're doing that, I think we're golden. And as long as our kids are doing that, I think they're golden. I think, I do believe experimentation, rebellion, critical thinking, all of that is necessary. And I encourage it in my own kids, because I don't believe that it's a static state. I don't believe that, if kids experiment or rebel for a certain phase, that's how they're going to remain for the rest of their life. I think, and like, I think life is just moving in flux, and you go with the flow, and you welcome, and just like in life, you welcome friends from different stages in their life, um, from different, everyone's gone through something different from different circumstances, and as long as you're open to being inclusive and loving with your children, I don't think you'll go wrong. I think for many of us, certainly the generation I grew up in, they see parents, and the Desi community can at times feel very, very restrictive and judgmental. That's just the nature of how we are. That's how, I think that's model minorities competing with each other, or feeling like they're in competition with each other. Whatever it is, it's meant that typically our parents, or a generation, or the parents before them, have been very tough on kids, have been really like, okay, there's a very narrow box for behavior, and if you diverge outside of that box, then you will feel the ostracization, or you'll feel the wrath of the community. All that is quite nonsense, because I feel that, when it comes down to it, our community, we're such a funny people. We're such an, if you strip away the masks and the appearances, we're such a funny, humorous, accepting people. When you look into our history and our culture, we're very warm. Um, we're just a loving people. So it's odd to me. It's not always mirrored in literature as much as it should be or can be. So it's exciting to do that now, and it's exciting with the round of books coming up now that we see that happening.
I love that because, as you were saying, I'm like, one of the reasons I feel the generations before were also harder on themselves as well as kids was because I think, we've had like 200 years of colonial rule, and that's done things to people. Like, people were always struggling, or so many of them were struggling to make ends meet or like have enough. And I think in that state, wanting stability doesn't shock me. Like, these are newly independent countries that we are talking about, and then, whoever came to a completely new ground like the West, had to start literally from scratch. So when you start from that place, there, we don't have many families that have like intense generational wealth or freedom for like, hundreds of years. So I feel in some way I understand it, but I also know what you mean when our own, I guess, friend circles feel judgy,
Yeah.
whether it's for motherhood or, as a parent, you hear so many comments which can get stifling because you're like, oh, I must be the one mom doing it all wrong, or like my child has the worst behavior on, or whatever. Like, there are things on an everyday basis that, you question. But having the openness and the non-judginess, whenever or however much we can do it, I guess, as building that empathy within our communities, I think is really valuable. And I think children learn from what they see. So if we can show that, my hope is that our children also will sort of absorb that. And I love that you sort of touched on how we are seeing new stories now. I'm meeting tons of like new writers, lots of moms who are writing, across the board, children's books, picture books, middle grade, young adult. So talk to me about like anyone in the community that you've been reading that you really enjoyed and you'd like to share their work.
Oh, I'd love to do this. This is my favorite part. There's lots going on that I think is very exciting. I just picked the region of Pakistan to tell you a few of the things coming out from Pakistan that I'm really, or from Pakistani creators that I'm really excited about. One is the movie Joyland. You might have heard of that. It's become quite famous. It was nominated for the Oscar in Best Foreign Film. Just absolutely stunning visually as well as the plot. I loved everything about it. Really, a story that deals with the patriarchy in a very creative, new way that I haven't seen before. So that was very exciting. Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy is a documentary maker. I believe she's Pakistani British. She does lots of amazing nonfiction documentaries. I just saw one, A Girl in the River, as we're talking about serious topics. She covers very serious topics in very serious ways. There's no humor. But I do love watching them. What she does, she's brilliant at doing. So I do love that. There's a book here called American Fever. This came out by Dur-e-Azaz Amna. I believe Peerbagh, I think you've highlighted her as
We
well.
did. We interviewed her. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing, yes, and I think that's where I picked this up from. So I'm now recommending back. I really love this book. I think this could function also as maybe a young adult for more mature readers as well. Poetry is something I've gotten into. Pleiades is a literary journal from the States, and they're an experimental poetry magazine. They just recently did a folio on writers from Pakistan and its diaspora. So I published a poem in here, which I'm very happy
Oh,
about, and it's also venting about the patriarchy. So I encourage anyone to pick that up.
I love all of these because Joyland has been on my number one like to watch list for a long time. Everyone's like loved it, so I can't wait to watch it, and all the other options as well because I think these are all different ways of telling such unique stories. And you
Yes.
named Pakistan as one country, and I love just exposing myself to different stories from the country itself because sometimes people forget that 25% of humanity lives in that area, so people just sometimes will not recognize that our stories are just as diverse. Even if it's like one nationality, it is so many people who have different unique stories and different ways of saying them as well. I love that roundup. I'm definitely going to pick on many of those that you recommended. And now, coming back to you, Salma, what is your next project? I know that I feel like I was Instagram stalking you a little bit where you were saying, I guess, in one of your stories that, you write different things. You just mentioned poetry. Like, so is some completely different form coming up? Like, what should we expect as a reader?
Oh, I wish I knew the full answer to give you to this one too. But yes, no, poetry is coming up. I'm working on a book of poems. I think that's going to take a while. But I am working on a young adult novel. This time around, I'm trying to write in the voice of a young boy. I think I explored girlhood, and I would now like to explore boyhood and how difficult it is for Desi boys growing up. This is a story that this hopefully is going to be a story about a boy dealing with a health crisis. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm having fun with it. Humor is something that I want to incorporate again into this story. But I do want it to be a bit different from Mona. One of the feedback I think so many people, and I think this is a common experience for many writers, is with their first book, so many people assume you are the character you have written about that I would like to get a little bit away from that and explore a very different character.
I really enjoy that obviously because it also shows your range as a writer when you start exploring different kinds of characters. But I was really hoping you're going to tell me there's another part for Mona because I want to know what happens. Like I got so into it when I was reading. I'm like, okay, so tell me more because it's a very exciting story, and I love reading children's books and middle grade books, and so I was like, okay, I need another part for it. So I hope at some point you think about, oh, does she have another story because she's such a spirited character, and I loved reading her perspective a lot. So yeah, I'm putting that in that, please think about it.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's so sweet. If I write it, it will be for you for first and foremost. Then,
I'm happy to do the advanced reader copies and like provide feedback. You know what I mean? It's nice to read characters that are um, not stereotypical, that are questioning, the way that things are, that are feeling that they want to ask questions like, "Am I a feminist?" And they have all these different influences. And I loved when the part where she has the Egyptian cousin of a friend, and who's kind of like asking her like big questions, and these girls are like they don't know yet, but they are still wanting to explore, and they think, there's a school cousin, and now we are going to suddenly, I guess, graduate into something older. And then her other experiences when she goes to Pakistan, and again she goes through those influences from other people. I think as a 12-year-old you are experiencing that, and so it felt real, it felt very authentic the way that description happened. So I feel like she has another story.
yeah, yeah, I will say my editor really wanted a second story, but I felt like I had felt like, okay, I think she's done. She's come to some kind of growth. Um, but you never know. I mean, I did start writing the beginning of something. It might take me a little bit longer to kind of piece it together. I will say I had so much fun writing her. I was laughing throughout. I wrote this mostly during the pandemic, so it was a very joyful way to spend the pandemic, I will say.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I feel like now I've met quite a few people who've like had these beautiful pandemic projects, and it's great for readers. I'll say that kids who are growing up and they can read these kinds of stories. I think it gives them the feeling that their stories matter, and they could have a story as well. So that's the reason I think that's another reason why. Having these diverse books or books from different perspectives is so valuable, and not only just for desi kids, like for all kids, because there's that natural curiosity about what happens in the Middle East, or what happens when so and so comes here, because United States, for example, has the largest Middle Eastern population outside of the Middle East, with so many people from Palestine, for example, who live here. And a lot of people don't know what their experiences are, right? So just even scratching that, book by book is what gives that sense of understanding. And I guess that empathy comes from understanding once people know what other people's experiences are. And you're doing your part in making that happen, for which I'm very happy, and I'm loving the fact that we can spotlight your work with our community as well, because I feel it's a book everyone should read, and definitely follow you for all the new books that are coming as well.
Ah, thank you so much. It's so lovely to connect with you. This is the best part of writing, is the connections and the community we make. So I thank you for it too.
I appreciate you, Salma.